Hey, how's it going? So today I'm going to be reviewing a very special film for you guys, a movie that I actually decided to review myself. You know, nobody recommended it for me, nobody suggested I watched it, nobody suggested I reviewed it ever. This is just totally, what I decided to review for you guys, just on my own, no help at all. The film is called The Changeling. It stars George C. Scott and it's directed by, who is it directed by? Peter Medak. There you go. The Changeling is a movie about a haunted house that's spooky and a guy gets spooked and the haunted house is spooky. I give it 5 out of 5. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Nah, I'm just kidding. But yeah, The Changeling. So I actually watched this movie for the very first time this year. I know actually nobody suggested or recommended that I watch this movie. I just totally decided to watch it on my own. But yeah, so The Changeling, I actually just watched it for the first time, I believe, last night. The film follows John Russell, and John Russell is a music composer who actually just lost his wife and his son in a fatal car accident, not too long ago from where this movie took place, and he's now moving into this big, giant house, just like almost a mansion. And he's living in there now where he's just kind of like living on his own. And of course, there's some pretty strange stuff going on in this house. And there's doors slamming, there's like, windows breaking and stuff like that, just a bunch of random shit. And John decides to come to the bottom of this. He wants to know why this house is haunted, why it's, so spooky. And he suddenly learns the story of a young boy who used to live in that very house, and that's where I'm gonna stop. Because if I went any further, I would spoil everything about the movie. But yes, watching this movie for the first time, I didn't know much about it. All I knew is that it was about a haunted house, I've heard about this movie here and there from people, but I've never actually, watched a movie for myself, and yeah, so, I liked it. I actually really liked it. One thing that this movie reminded me a lot of, and this movie kept popping up in my head while watching this, but, The Orphanage, a movie, produced by Guillermo del Toro, directed by J.A. Boyona? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. The Orphanage. This movie reminded me a lot of that for some reason. They're kind of very similar, very similar storyline in some cases. Both have to do with creepy children and whatnot. So, the movies were very, very similar, and that movie kept popping up in my head while watching this movie. I don't know why I brought that up, I just thought I'd share it, but yeah. So The Changeling, I liked it. I thought it was pretty damn spooky. Pretty spooked. This movie spooked me. But no, one thing I actually really appreciate about this movie is that there's nothing really that terrifying going on visually, There's not really that much visual eye candy in here, stuff that, looks scary. It's just more so the concept and the story that kind of makes it a little bit frightening. So visually, there's not really a whole lot going on in this movie, There's not like a bunch of spooky ghosts popping out at you and like creatures and blood and gore, There's not really any of that stuff, like I said. It's more so like the concept that makes it scary. Whoops, my phone dropped. And that's kind of the exact same case with The Orphanage as well, which is why I think this movie reminded me of The Orphanage so much. But yes, and the movie, at the same time manages to be pretty terrifying. So it does a great job at that, it's movies like these that I really appreciate, because the movie tells you that they don't have to have, spooky ghouls and blood and gore in order for it to be scary, the concept alone can be just as terrifying. So yeah, visually there's not much going on, but I actually really appreciate it for that, and these are exactly the kind of movies I love to watch. It's exactly the same case with The Witch as well, which is my favorite movie of the year. Spoilers, but yeah, it's the exact same case with The Witch. Not a lot of people, especially from the general audiences, like The Witch, and that's exactly the same exact reason, is because they expected there to be a bunch of, cheap jump scares and blood and gore and all this visual, stuff going on, but really it's more so the concept that's really terrifying, and, the slow burn, I guess, psychological aspects of it that make it terrifying, but people don't have an imagination, sadly, so it's just not that scary to them. But yeah, I actually really like The Changeling. It's actually a lot better than I thought it would be. Like I said, I really appreciate it for saying, hey, you don't need to have all this stuff in your movie in order for it to be scary. You can just make a spooky story and have the movie be just as effective. So yeah, I really appreciate it for that. And another thing about this movie is that there is a seance scene where, they're trying to connect with the dead, and this entire scene is almost completely identical to Insidious, the part in Insidious where the old lady's trying to come in contact with Dalton, from the, what do they call it, the further or whatever. The seance scene in this movie is almost exactly like the seance scene in Insidious, so I can definitely see where Insidious got that whole idea from. It was from this movie, so There you go. And the seance scene is actually very terrifying in this movie as well. It's what makes it more effective than Insidious, I think, is because of the fact that, like I said, they don't show much. You know, it's just all up to sort of your imagination. You know, it's the fear of the unknown is what makes it scary. So just because there's not a lot going on visually doesn't make it, you know, any less scary. In fact, to me, it makes it more terrifying. And because the movie, you know, is fairly normal and I guess more realistic than, you know, say Insidious would be, where they're not seeing all these spooky shit going on in the house, you know, just when that part comes up and, you know, all the supernatural stuff starts happening somewhat, you're just kind of like, oh wow, that's a lot more terrifying, because it just adds a lot more, you know, it just adds a sense of realism to it. Like, you know, it's just a lot more realistic because of that, you know. It's just, there's not much going on. Like, you know, if somebody were to, you know, be in a haunted house that was haunted, you know, this is exactly how it would go down, you know. I'm sure they wouldn't be seeing spooky spirits or anything like that. You know, just kind of like the occasional, you know, doors slamming by themselves and, you know, like mirrors and windows breaking and stuff like that. And it's just, that's exactly how it would go down. And then when that seance part comes up where, you know, that's exactly how it would go down as well, it just kind of makes it a little bit more terrifying to me personally. Not saying that Insidious isn't terrifying, like, you know, I actually really, really love that film. But yeah, I mean, just, I appreciate this movie a lot more, I should say. But yes, The Changeling is quite freaky. I could definitely see where all the, you know, influences came from and all the inspirations came from. It's just a really solid haunted house movie, I think. It actually reminded me a lot of The Shining and Rosemary's Baby as well, because, you know, like I said, all these movies sort of follow that same formula of focusing on psychological terror rather than, you know, jump scares and blood and gore. So, yeah, and those are, you know, my favorite kinds of horror movies. So it's just, yeah, this movie's really up my alley, and I really did like this movie a lot. So yeah, overall, The Changeling, I really liked it. I really, really did. And overall, I'm probably going to give the film a 4 out of 5. I would definitely recommend this movie to you guys. It's really, really good. It's a very solid haunted house, you know, horror flick, and yeah, I think you guys would get a kick out of it if you haven't seen it, that is. I know there is one person who watches my videos who has seen this movie a dozen times, apparently, and yeah, so, no, really, thank you for recommending this movie to me. I actually did buy the DVD on Amazon because of your recommendation, so yeah, I bought it and I liked it, so there you go. Alright, so yeah, check out The Changeling. I'm done talking about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Jacob Palacio. Stay tuned for more Halloween reviews coming to you in the near future, and I'll see you guys later.